When I tell you that this book has fundamentally changed the way I view life, I am not exaggerating. And I honestly believe it could potentially shape the way that you think about life as well. Now, it's fair to say that I love reading, and I usually write down key takeaways from every book that I read. And I've got all these notebooks in my office of different books that have really left a lasting impression on me. But this book was so profound that it actually consumed 12 sides of the notebook that I have been writing in. With all of the takeaways and lessons that I learnt. So what is this book? It is Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. Now, it's a book I actually read last year, so in 2024. And ever since that point, it has fundamentally changed the way I view myself, other people, and life situations in general. Now, I'm willing to bet that at this point, probably your very own ego is kicking in, saying, you don't need to read this trash. I want a video about practical steps on how to move to Italy, not about a book that I've got to read. It's full of woo-woo nonsense. On to the next video. This is really common because essentially ego goes wherever you go. And if you're wondering what ego even is, well, this book defines it as an unhealthy belief in your own importance. But there's a problem with ego because, as the title of this book suggests, it is your enemy. It is not your friend. It's more of a hindrance than a help in so many different aspects of your life. And I'm going to be talking about the key takeaways that I've learned from this book in the 3 different sections of this book. So part 1 is aspire, part 2 is success, and part 3 is failure. As always, there are timestamps below so you can pick and choose the sections that you want to pay attention to. But I promise you, by the end of this video, I am certain there will be something that will ring true for you or could potentially change the experiences that you have going forward. And if you're interested in picking up a copy of this book, I will also put the link below in the show notes. So let's talk about part 1, aspire. The first takeaway that I really gleaned from this section is that talk and hype often replace action. This is super true because when we talk about something and we talk about it enough to enough people, we almost convince ourselves that we have already achieved or completed what it is that we're talking about. Now, I can say that this is true for me personally because at the beginning of this year, even towards the end of last year, I started talking about my desire to create an expat community called Expats in Bloom. I created a wait list. I started to mention it in videos. But you see, I spoke about it so much that subconsciously I had convinced myself I'd already done the work. And so I lost the momentum to continue working on it. It's not abandoned by any means. It's something that I will quietly continue on with for the rest of this year. But I've learned to stop talking about it because until something is actually completed, you need to stay silent for the majority of the journey. And I did it with my channel's rebrand. So I've been thinking about ways to change up what I'm doing and to switch up the content and videos that I talk about. But I didn't share that with everyone. I kept it to myself. And only when I was certain what I was going to be doing did I start talking about it. And I'm telling you, the results have been fantastic because I actually delivered on what it was that I wanted to do. And where this can play out for you is if you desire to move to Italy and all you do is talk about that desire with people, at some point you convince yourself that there's nothing more that you need to do and that at some day, somehow it's going to happen. But you've got to stop talking and you've got to start doing. And there is a lot of power in silence. And I think people don't really consider this enough because we live in a society where people want to display and tell the world what it is that they're doing, but sometimes it's better to do that work first and then talk about it later. Because you see, something else that this aspect talks about is that the only relationship between work and chatter is that one kills the other. So I think the message and the key takeaway from this is less talk, more work. And then when you've completed the work, then by all means you can shout about it from the rooftops. But if you plan to move to Italy or you're working on something here in Italy, work on it first before you start talking about it, because otherwise you run the risk of completely losing momentum and not making any progress. The second lesson I learned from this part of the book is that those who have subdued their ego understand that it doesn't degrade you when others treat you poorly. it degrades them. This is really important because you see, life here in Italy is real. And if you plan to move here, unfortunately, you are going to meet people that don't treat you very well, or people that annoy you, or people that don't have the best of intentions. And so this is a very, very important takeaway to remember. When people treat you poorly, you must remember that it's a reflection of them and not of you. Because you see, what happens when you haven't controlled your ego is that you want to defend yourself. You want to prove that the other person is wrong. You want to, in a way, protect yourself because your ego has been hurt, in a way, by what this person has done. But when your ego is calm and you understand that it's never personal and it's all about the other person, you respond differently to those kinds of situations. I've definitely met a lot of people in the 7 years that I've lived here who have annoyed me or have not had the best of intentions or just generally have many different heads. But I have learned, especially since reading this book, to remember that it's a reflection of them and not of me. And you just have to let people be who they are. And then you decide your response in any given moment. Trying to defend yourself, trying to prove your worth to people who have this kind of mentality is a waste of time and a waste of energy. Far better for you to let those people be who they are and understand that it reflects on them more so than it reflects on you. The second part of this book talks about success. And the first lesson that I really gleaned from this book is to learn from everyone and everything. This is so true. I always say that everyone and everything is our teacher, from terrible situations through to wonderful situations, from people who mistreat us through to people who respect us. Everyone and everything can teach us something about life. And this is what you must remember. I kind of feel that people sometimes have a very closed attitude to learning. They believe that it's only when you're in education that you're truly learning. And as soon as you leave school or university, that aspect of your life stops. But I view things differently. Now, here in Italy, there is so much importance placed on having a good educational background. You see people study for degree upon degree upon degree, stay in university all through their 20s, and honestly believe that that makes them somebody more learned than a person who hasn't followed that path. But I believe in something called the university of life. You learn through your experiences. And sometimes those skills are skills that are not gained through studying for a qualification. I'm talking about communication skills, people management skills, the way that you carry yourself in different social situations. You don't necessarily learn that by studying from a textbook. And so this is what I mean. Learning is really a never-ending process. And I think people close themselves off when they really believe that they know everything, because like this book says, we can't keep learning if we think we know everything. And so I almost want to encourage you, like especially if it's your dream to move here to Italy, to remain forever curious, to always be questioning, to always be wanting to learn more and to discover more. Even if you arrive here and you've got a pretty decent level of Italian, I'm sure that there's more words that you could learn. Maybe you could attempt to study dialect, for example. Or if you move here and you already feel comfortable with the culture and the lifestyle, what about Italy do you not know enough on? Maybe it's the history, or maybe it's a particular cultural aspect. There's always something new that we can educate ourselves on. Even when it comes to moving to Italy, what more can you learn? You know, can you learn from other people's experiences? Can you watch videos? And of course, keep an open mind, because one person's negative experience is not necessarily going to be yours. But what can you learn from people who are actually living out the dream that you want? This is what you need to be asking yourself. And you need to be willing to learn through your entire journey here in Italy. I'm constantly learning. Even now, 7 years in, I'm constantly learning about the working culture here, because it's sometimes very different to what I'm used to. I'm constantly learning about everyday culture and, you know, food, and just the importance that Italians place on different things compared to what British people might place on certain aspects of their life. And so it is an ever-evolving journey of learning. And I can only tell you that it's a wonderful thing, because Italy for me has been my greatest teacher and continues to be, and will always be, I think. And I credit Italy for making me a much better person. So never stop learning. The second aspect that I gleaned from this section of the book is that only you know the race you're running. This is something that is so true, because at whatever stage in your life you're at, there will be a moment where you start looking outside of yourself and you start pitting yourself against colleagues, against friends, against family members as to where you're at in your life, the things you're achieving, what's working for you and what isn't. And there's a huge problem with that because everyone's lives are so different. Even if you have some similar aspects, there are many other aspects of that person's life that are going to be very different to yours. It could be financial aspects, it could be family aspects, it could be, I don't know, learning aspects, whatever it may be. And so you have to remember that only you know what you are doing in your life. Only you know what it is that you want to achieve. And you have to learn to start to drown out the noise from around you. And this reminded me also of a comment that I received on my latest video on YouTube from somebody there are a couple who live in London and they want to move to Italy. And, a lot of people have been saying, don't do it. And it reminded me of how people respond when people say about wanting to move to Italy, because usually the people that speak about Italy in such a negative way don't necessarily do it with bad intentions. They do it because they want to protect the people who want to move to this country, but also maybe also because they've had terrible experiences. And so they want to, in a way, open the other person's eyes as to the reality of life here. But I just kind of feel only you know the race that you're on. If you know that this is something you want to do, it really doesn't matter what other people say. I was talking about this in my podcast episode this week. There's a content creator called Vanessa Lau. She recently got married and her father in his wedding speech apologized to her for not believing in her enough when she started her YouTube channel. She's a huge YouTuber. She's nearly at 1 million subscribers. And her father at the beginning did not support her or believe in her. Yet she continued on, and she said the lesson here is that even if people don't support you or they are not very positive at the very beginning, it doesn't mean that they won't come around later on and support you then. And it's this, isn't it? Even at the beginning, if people are critical of your idea to move to Italy, or if people don't support you in the way that you want, it doesn't mean that later on people won't support you and won't have your back when they realize that actually it was the right thing for you, because only you know the race that you are on. So please don't ever change your life path or what it is that you want to do because of what other people are saying to you or because of the lack of support. You've got to do what's right for you. Open your eyes to the reality of life here in Italy. Absolutely. I'm not telling you it's a fairy tale here, because you all know it's not if you followed my channel for some time. But if you know that this is something you want to do, don't let anybody or anything hold you back. Find a way to do it, because as this book tells you, you know your circumstances, you know you better than anybody else. And so stop comparing, stop looking outside of yourself and make things happen the way that you want them to. The next section of the book focuses on failure. And the first lesson that I gleaned from this section is don't let stubbornness make a bad situation worse. Now, I like this because I think sometimes when we resist things, when we try to keep things the same, or we have a particular viewpoint or focus in life and we're unwilling to change that, if we are already in a bad situation, it can make it a lot worse. Now, I can look at my own life here in Italy and tell you how true this is, because I've moved here in Italy 3 times into 3 different cities. So I started off in Salerno, I moved to Palermo, and now I'm back in the Salerno province. Now, if I had a stubborn mindset, I might have said, I don't want to move. I'm settled. When I first left Salerno, I had all my documentation in order. That's a huge deal when you live here in Italy. So I could have allowed my stubbornness to stop me from making that progress. However, I wanted to change my situation. I was no longer happy in Salerno city because I felt like I wasn't fulfilled and I wanted to change. And if I hadn't moved to Palermo and I hadn't gone through the experiences there, I think I would have made my situation in Salerno worse, and I probably wouldn't still have the affection that I have for that city as I do today. So you must be willing to change your mind about things, to be more open-minded and to go with the flow a little bit. I think being flexible is a really, really important aspect of life here in Italy, and I feel like this is the lesson here. When things don't go right with bureaucracy, because trust me, that's going to be your big problem. You might feel really stubborn about the way that you approach the situation. you might want to focus on something and you might want people to respond to you in a certain way, but you've got to learn to come at it from a different perspective and to try to approach the situation from a different angle, because stubbornness and wanting to do things the way that you've always done them is going to be your biggest dream killer here in Italy. It's going to make your life exceptionally difficult. And I've always said it, you know, when I go into expat groups on Facebook, it's the number one thing I see, people complaining about an aspect of Italy because they can't do something or get something that they used to have in their own country. Stop it, because if you really try to be that stubborn about your life here in Italy, you will make a bad situation that might feel really, really heavy in that moment even worse. Try to come at things from a different perspective. The second lesson that I gleaned from this particular part of the book is that the less attached we are to outcomes, the better. Now, this really ties nicely into surrender, basically, because I feel like when you decide to move to Italy, you have a bit of a dream and an idea of what your life might look like. And, you know, if you have taken my course, I will link it up here. This is a mindset-based course, by the way, because everything begins and ends up here. If you've taken my course, no doubt you've started to visualize what your life is going to look like in Italy. But the key thing that you need to pay attention to is that you are not attached to that outcome. You're also open to things playing out in a different way. Now, I can say, for me personally, there are many aspects of my life that are still very, very true to what my original vision of life in Italy would be like. But there are many other aspects that have changed. And I've had to learn to be less obsessed with sticking to things how I want them to be and more willing to go with the flow, as we've mentioned already, and see where life is going to take me. And often, the changes and the things that you didn't anticipate take you somewhere better. You know, I look at the pandemic years, for example. I was living them out here in Italy, and, you know, it was that moment that made me question the first job that I was in at that time, which, you know, didn't pay very well. And although gave me some great experience, I knew I wasn't happy in that position. And so it allowed me to reassess what I was doing here. I decided to accept another job at a school that was much closer. And so, you know, don't be attached to outcomes. Sometimes those things that play out in a way that seem difficult happen for a reason, and they help you to have a much better experience. The third lesson that I gleaned from this part of the book is to know when to use a full stop. In American English, because I know a lot of you are in America, period, okay? Know when to use a period, because I think a lot of people drag out situations. They make things so much worse than they need to be because they don't know when to stop. Now, I think about our experience in Palermo. We had a difficult time in Palermo. The 2.5 years were not easy, predominantly for my boyfriend's work. And I think if we hadn't known when to put the full stop, when to put the period, we would have continued to stay there and continue to struggle. Like, knowing when to stop meant that we took the decision to move back to the Salerno province to improve our lives. And already I can see a drastic transformation in the way that we both feel and in the life that we're starting to lead. And it's this, like, know when to use that full stop. Nothing has to be a never ending sentence. You must know when it's time to change things up and to do things differently, and to end one thing and to start something new. Like, it all boils down to change, really and truly, because so many people are afraid of change because they're afraid of looking bad or looking like they failed, because, you know, it's all coming back to ego. This is what this book is about. But at the end of the day, even if people perceive our time in Palermo as a failure, for me, I know it was one of the best experiences in terms of personal growth. And, you know, I learned a lot and I actually improved my life as a result of all of that. And actually coming back here has been the biggest win. And so it's this, isn't it? Like, know when to use that full stop. Know when something is no longer working for you and when to change things and switch things up and do things differently. Because I promise you, it's going to stop the struggle that you might experience here or the things that are difficult here. And, you know, even if you're planning to move to Italy and you're finding it really tough, you're not finding yourself in alignment with the decision, you're finding that, you know, maybe the reality is different to what you'd imagined, you're not sure you're going to make it work. If you have that much doubt within you, know when to use the full stop. Maybe not now, maybe in the future, but just know that there's no sense continuing with something if it's no longer making you feel good. And that's essentially what this lesson is teaching us. And the final lesson that I've learned from this particular part of the book is that a better response to an attack or a slight or something you don't like, love. Love is the antidote to ego. It is egoless, it is powerful, and it's something that we need to lean more into, especially when we feel offended or hurt or attacked in some way. Now, I can relate to this with the haters that I have on my YouTube channel from time to time, who honestly say things that I just don't think they would ever say if they were to meet me in real life. But you see, those kinds of comments used to bother me at the very beginning, because I honestly couldn't understand why somebody would sit behind a keyboard and suddenly kind of vent all their hatred of life onto the person that they're watching on YouTube who they don't know. But I will say that now my response is love. If I publish the comment, usually I respond with something like sending you lots of love. And because I've changed my focus, my ego no longer wants to be like, what are you saying? It's not true. You know, I know what I'm talking about here in Italy, blah, 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 whatever it may be. I kind of feel sometimes this is the truth. Love is the strongest response to any kind of attack, because hatred wants more hatred. And the only way that you stop hatred and any kind of negative aspect is through love. It's not what people expect. People are not interested in kindness. They want you to respond back in the same way that they've responded to you. But if you respond back with kindness and love, it usually kills whatever kind of discussion that person is having with you. So I just think it's the best way to approach situations here in Italy. Guess what? You're going to come across rude people, especially in a lot of government offices, but don't respond rudely back. Respond back with empathy, with kindness. It's not easy to work in these places, I think. The bureaucracy, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people will tell you a job in a government office is pretty cushy, but I will say, I think maybe with bureaucracy and the pressures that are placed on them, maybe it's not an easy job. Maybe they're not happy in their lives. Have compassion, have empathy. Don't necessarily respond in the same way that people treat you if they're in a very negative space, for example, because I think there are much better ways that you can approach the situation, and it always comes down to love. And the final closing part of this book that I think is the truest thing ever is that you must sweep the floor every minute of every day and then sweep again. This is true, everyone. Your ego is there. It's not going anywhere. And so whenever you have a thought or an opinion, you need to be asking yourself, is this my ego, or is this really how I feel? Is it validated, or is it ego-based? Because you've got to keep sweeping the floor. You've got to keep sweeping out the thoughts that are ego-based, that are holding you back, that are stopping you from achieving the things that you want to do. And you've got to keep that floor clean so that you can really assess every single thought and action as whether or not it's coming from ego, or whether or not it's something that is really genuinely how you feel about a situation. This book has transformed my life, and I think you can probably tell from the lessons I've shared with you just how powerful it really is. And so if you want to get a copy of it yourself, I'll put the link below in the show notes. But I hope that you've learned something from this video. In fact, comment below and tell me, was there a lesson from this book that really ran true for you at whatever stage in your life you're at, whether you're moving to Italy, whether you're living here, whether you're just watching my channel for the sake of watching it. What lesson ran true for you? I'd love to know. Comment below and let me know. And if you've enjoyed this video, this is the one I think you'll love next. It's about some conversations that I've had in Italy that have really, really changed my experience. I will see you in the next video.